We're going to get into a lot of stuff, including a video breakdown on Grayson Rodriguez, the tail end with Walker Buehler. But I'm sure this is the question that's on a lot of baseball people's mind. How you feeling? What's going on?
It was good to be back for sure. Obviously, it's kind of another step in this process or whatnot. But yeah, a little sore, I'm glad we got it done, but now we've got a couple more to kind of get some stuff figured out. Obviously, not everything is kind of exactly the way you want it right off the jump, but yeah, big box checked.
Yeah, I was going to say that it seems like a very big milestone to get back on the mound in a game setting there. I mean, what was the adrenaline like for you? Because it's been so long between your last outing. I mean, how did it feel just to be out there in a game setting, even if it's not the big leagues?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I think being in the clubhouse is a big part, and being back around guys. And no, it's just fun. Obviously, we had a little day game, so didn't have to wait too long to get out there. But yeah, it's a fun deal.
So I said this on the Tuesday show because we took Monday off for Labor Day, but I was watching your start. It was like tail end of our game, and we were losing by a lot. So I had you on the iPad while we had like the 8th, 9th inning going on, and listen, you've said it, and I assumed you were saying it in like a self-deprecating manner, like, oh, I've put weight on, like, oh, bad weight. You look like a brick shithouse, dude. What? Like, do you feel like, I don't know, like getting stronger, getting thicker, getting durable was kind of like your plan to come out of TJ?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't have more body fat now than I used to, right? But
Yeah, you got a shit ton more muscle. You look like you're playing outside linebacker for the Rams on Sunday.
I also got to pick the jersey. That's my favorite jersey down there. So it may make you look a little bigger with that V-neck, but no, I'm probably 12 to 15 pounds heavier than I've ever been in the big leagues, at least. And yeah, I think it's part of it. It's all this mass times acceleration stuff, and I've kind of always gone against the grain and not really cared too much about it, but they cut you open twice. Sometimes you got to try something else.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the mechanics, and someone put together a really cool side-by-side of, just how much quicker you are. I know we touched on that a little bit in another episode, but it was cool to see it in real time. Real quick, before we get to that though, what was your goal kind of out of that outing? Was it really just to get out there and throw and just feel good? Or, were there any mental checkpoints going into that?
No, I mean, I hate to say like as experienced as I am, but like I have played in the big leagues a decent amount and thrown, 600 some odd innings. And there's this kind of understanding of the feeling of the ball out of the hand and certain pitches and kind of what I think I need to be able to do to get major leaguers out. And you're just kind of trying to see how close you are to that. Obviously, they've got some good players on that AAA team. And, I had 2 good innings, but obviously some things that I would want to improve. I gave up 2 hard hit balls and a 3-0 count and an 0-2 bad fastball and stuff like that. But for the most part, you're just trying to get out of there healthy and feeling good about yourself. And I got challenged, which was cool. So that was a funny one. It was a strike. So yeah, I guess everything kind of went my way.
So I was going to ask you about the challenge system, because that capped a 3-pitch punch out. And right before they went to replay, or like went to the board to show the challenge, you could see like you started your K strut a little bit, like you were walking around the mound,
Yep.
You were really confident. Were you thinking like, okay, let me stop and look at the board? Or was it like, I'm going to sell the crap out of this? And
Well, no, I haven't done it in 400 and something odd days, right? I struck out the guy in the first, but it was to end the inning. So it just kind of came out. I don't think there was really any thought to it, but it is kind of a funny deal where it goes up like like a tennis serve or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it's kind of cool.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the numbers and like how that works. I guess you get to miss 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it would work in the big leagues. I think most of these things that we've changed recently, we've always said like, well, I don't know if it'll work in the big leagues, and they seem to be working. I don't think I'm going to be the biggest proponent of it going to the major leagues, but I think it was probably a little bit better than I thought it would be.
Good. I'll take that. I think it's at least a little bit of a middle ground between the, what we have right now and like the full ABS, which I think is a little bit too far the other way.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's just like, how many can you get right? You know what I mean? Everyone's, like, okay, you get 3 of them. Like if you miss them, but then there's really no limit as long as you're right. Right.
yes.
So like, it's kind of, I guess open-ended in that way. And I think that's kind of a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Cause it can be 10 if you get 7 right.
Right.
Which is just overwhelming.
Yeah. It can be a lot. I think like, it's just too much.
Yeah.
It's also a little bit of an indictment on the umpire in that one. That'd be a rough go if he's getting it wrong that many times in a row. But it was Bruce Kuntz on Twitter who put it side by side. It was you, of course, in a start in the big leagues, and then of course this start most recently, where we talked about the getting rid of the overhead move, but just in general the tempo. I mean, you're delivering the ball in the video on the left before you're even really like getting down and splitting your hands on the video on the older side. What's kind of the mentality behind the faster tempo, and how long did it take to kind of get comfortable with that?
I mean, if you go and look back at college or high school or even some in pro ball, like I didn't do the overhead forever. I think the only time I did overhead in college was literally my last game that I threw in college. So, this delivery is probably, if not more so, equally as kind of prevalent in my career as the overhead. There's certain kind of rhythm pieces, the tap and stuff like that with the glove that we liked some of the stuff that was happening when I did that. And the over the head is kind of a rhythm tempo thing. Obviously everyone talks about how many guys, what percentage in the Hall of Fame goes over the head and all that kind of stuff, but it's obviously part of the game. But for me right now, I think trying to be as simple and somewhat athletic as I can be is the hardest thing to get when you're coming out of rehab. And you spend so many months just playing catch on flat ground and kind of making a lot of throws that you're really just trying not to hurt, right? You're just trying to like feel good, as opposed to kind of throwing for a performance enhance or something like that, like trying to throw harder or whatever. And so that kind of athletic part of that, I think is something that, at least for now, I'm going to stick with. But I don't know, next year I may have the overhead back. It's just a matter of what you feel like puts you in a good position to feel rhythmic and explosive and athletic.
And that's where the tempo comes from too, I assume, because like when I see a tempo and up tempo delivery, I'm actually thinking about your guy at Vandy, Carson Fulmer, right? That's the guy that kind of jumps to mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, it's less so about us trying to dictate a tempo. For me, it's always been, we used to long toss a lot more. We used to throw a lot of balls really hard, trying to be really athletic. In college, you end up doing a lot of PFPs and a lot of kind of non-pitching type throwing. And it just speeds your body up, right? It's not necessarily that I'm trying to dictate this tempo. It's just I'm doing the move that I do to the plate. And I don't necessarily know from same spot when I go over the head, if my hands get to the same place, I don't necessarily think I'm that much faster. It's just that there's not this drawn out thing before that makes the whole clip longer. Does that make sense? It's like from the time my leg moves, it's probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Got it. And when you were kind of coming out of this game, how much do you look back at certain pitches, look back at the mechanics, or is it kind of just a feel thing? You already know where to go and where to build off of this past outing already?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of bats in there that get you kind of confused. I went 3-0 on a guy and kind of didn't really super feel like I misfired those. And then came back. I ended up striking the guy out to end the first inning. And I just tried to throw that ball right down the middle, but it ended up being away. So all my misses were kind of pulls. That's adrenaline, and that's kind of your shoulder. For me, like my elbow has been obviously the issue, but my shoulder was pretty sore or being used in that outing. Like if that, it's just not used to being out there as far as it was. If you're throwing the ball 3 or 4 miles an hour harder than you had been the week before, like, you're just not always ready for that. And so I didn't love it. And that's a pull. Like when my shoulder hurts, you pull the ball. So there's just little things like that you kind of figure out the ranges and the aim points or the feels that actually lead to making the throw that you want, right? It's not as simple as just pointing a gun, right, and shooting it there. There's a lot of little stuff and little feels and little things that you tell yourself that don't actually happen that lead you to what you actually want to occur. And that's what these rehabs are for, is for your body, number one, but also to kind of get your stuff, dialed in some way.
I've got a couple more questions on the rehab, but quick aside, my eyes drifted to your right. Huge bottle of Buffalo Trace. Where did that come from, man? Celebratory?
Yeah, we did a little run for when we wanted to be ready when I got back, and stumbled upon two big bottles.
Good stuff. I saw
always you. We gotta always be hunting.
I understand. Yeah, your agent Glaze sent me a photo when he was in Houston to go see fellow Excel guy Reed Detmer's throw. He got a whole bunch of stuff, and I was like,
"Yeah, Glaze does a good job with that.
He does a good job with it." But I also asked, like, "How do you get it home?" And he was like, "I brought the bubble wrap." So he was proactive about it too.
Yeah, he was ready to go.
So I saw you went airport bourbon, which is kind of crazy because like airport beer is the vibe thing.
Yeah, I just had to do it. They didn't really have a great selection. I went with a Calumet, which was okay. They had no Buffalo Trace, so it's just part of the process, I guess.
I get it. All right. Give us a chance to fire up Dodger fans, because like we've talked a lot about, over the course of this summer, how you're a guy that will ingest a lot of things that are said about you on social media or written about you or said about you on TV. We've also talked about these checkpoints. This is a huge checkpoint, throwing in a ball game. And the Dodger fans, like what I was taking in after that rehab, they were so excited to see you back on the mound. Like, how does that get you fired up to see the resounding, like, thank God Walker's back throwing, he's going to join us soon?
No, I mean, it's obviously cool. I think we have probably one of the arguably the top 3 fan bases in all of sports and especially baseball. And you can see with our attendance and kind of all the numbers behind that, right? But yeah, it's a great place to play, and I'm glad they want me back. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's a few more outings between now and then, but yeah, everything feels okay for right now, and was obviously happy with the rehab. So now it's do it 2 more times, maybe a third. You never know. You got to figure it out. And my big thing is I want to come back and be really good. I don't want to come back and I told somebody the other day I don't want to come back just because I have a locker, right? And it's important to me. There's 25 guys, 40 guys, however you want to look at it, that have put us in the position to play in the playoffs. And just because I was one of those guys, 3 years ago doesn't mean that I have to be a part of that equation this year or deserve it, right? I need to go and be good enough to help us win games. So that's kind of where I'm at.
What are some of the checkpoints moving forward to kind of make sure you can be that guy that can help win games? Is obviously just from a distance, I would say those 2 innings that you threw, I know you have the nitpick things like that guy could probably help somebody right now. But what are the checkpoints kind of moving forward to keep progressing towards potentially helping this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top end velocity was fine, right? Throwing, I hit 96, which is fine. For me, I would like to throw a little harder.
That's fine.
But the breaking balls are all kind of slow right now. So I think that's probably the next thing. You look at a breaking ball in a high school game, right? It's going to be in the 70s. You watch most of them in the big leagues, they're in the 80s, the mid 80s. And they were a little slow for me, even when my fastball's in that range. So that's kind of the next thing that I need to get going. But as long as they're sharp and whatever things, you can get away with some of that stuff. But those are kind of the nitpicky things for me.
We'll move to some other stuff in the game here in a minute, but I read a really good article on MLB.com that quoted Gavin Stone after his start. And you've got some weird sort of like voodoo magic going on because he was just PCL pitcher of the week, I saw. He shoved after the fact, man. And this guy has been It's been finicky, to be honest, this year. Like, he's gotten up, he's struggled at points in triple, but he's looked really good in triple. And he strung together one of his best, if not his best outing of the year as a piggyback on you. And he mentioned that, like, talking to you about baseball stuff, about non-baseball stuff was really nice. So the mentorship side of that, or just like the vet side of that, was that kind of cool to be back in a AAA, clubhouse, kind of chatting with, I don't know, your future teammates and your present teammates?
Yeah, it's weird. I actually kind of knew less guys than I thought I did that were in AAA, right? When you're kind of removed from it, you feel like, oh, it's just all the guys that were in big league camp with us. And you just think it's going to be this 25 guys, and it's just not. There's like 7 guys left or whatever. But no, obviously good to see the guys that you were in camp with. And yeah, Gavin's an interesting one because he's got the talent to do it. He's got the stuff. He started throwing this little cutter that I like, and yeah, he's starting to put it together. I think we've talked a lot about in the past about rookies and Dodger rookies and rookies in general, and like it is very, very difficult to come up and be really good in the major leagues quickly. Some of us are very fortunate to kind of fall into that ability. I think it's not always about the person. Obviously, Bobby Miller has been trending even better now, but had some rocky stuff in there. We've had rookies start off really good and then have a tough time. Like, it's just kind of a testament to how good everyone is in the major league. Like, they will adjust to you, and if you can't keep staying one step ahead of them, it's difficult. And Gavin, obviously, with this new cutter and trying to get the ball to go left, we know about the changeup and whatever, but he's making an adjustment, and hopefully when he comes back up, it'll pay some dividends for him.
What did you see in that exact outing right there, that it kind of just working off of you, that Gavin kind of looked like the guy that could potentially help out at the big league level at some point? And he's done it in flashes, but you mentioned that cutter. That's something that was standing out to me. Is it fastball command? Like, what are some of the separators from these guys that can come in AAA and put up some really good numbers and then kind of struggle once they get to the big leagues?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about a guy that has like a 70 or 80 grade pitch, you typically think of like the slider, the fastball, but he has a changeup, and changeup is one of the harder pitches to like continuously go to, right? Like, especially at the big league level. Like, if you think a changeup is coming and you sit on changeup, like, you're probably going to hit it, right? If the guy has a really, really good slider and it's in a decent spot, it's hard to do a whole lot with. So I think those guys have to be a little bit finer, and I think for him, getting ahead of guys, being able to throw something other than a fastball to get ahead, lets him kind of protect that pitch and keep that thing a little bit more hidden. And we saw in the big leagues he was having to throw a lot of changeups up just to try and throw strikes, and then they've seen they've seen it 2 or 3 times in the at bat, and it's just hard. So yeah. I think for him, having the ability to make the ball go both ways and getting ahead and kind of the basic stuff like that is really going to help him, especially going forward. But he just has to keep doing it, man. He has to agree and all that stuff. I think he's an interesting one where he went to Central Arkansas, and it's kind of not quite the level of some college baseball. Obviously, he's extremely talented. That's not a bash on him at all, but like, just certain, you play in the SEC, you play in Omaha, you play in all this stuff, and there's pressure and there's fans and there's all these things that you're going to see going forward. And if you haven't seen those things, you're having to make a lot of adjustments at once, right? You're having to adjust because you can't just throw fastballs by everyone because it's pro ball now, and your stuff, and now it's a new pitch, and I'm playing in front of a lot more people than I've ever seen, right? It kind of turns into a laundry list after a while, where I think some guys come up and they've played in certain environments for a long time, that it really, at least in my opinion, for me, it was more about just making sure that like I was pitching the way that I needed to, less so handling the TV and the fans and all of that kind of stuff, I guess.
Another guy who threw at BC threw in probably the biggest game of his career to this point in MHC and on Saturday. And, like we were talking about this yesterday. There are some games in the regular season that just kind of feel like playoff games. And all 3 games between the Dodgers and Braves this weekend felt like playoff games. And Sheehan, yes, he was behind 3-0, but it was 95-96 on the outer black. And Acuna takes it 121.7 dead center. That's like tip your cap. It's like, you're just an alien life form, dude. Whatever. But then Mookie has a great weekend too. And Freddie Freeman might get to 60 doubles. The baseball world wants to talk Mookie versus Acuna right now. And this weekend was awesome to see both of them at their best. What have you kind of taken away from Mookie Betts this year? I know you've watched a lot of Mookie this year, and then Acuna when you've had a chance to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, they're both obviously having special years. Acuna at 30, 60 or whatever has never been done. I think the big thing with Mookie is just all the stuff that he's doing that's not stat line stuff, right? Playing 3 different positions and hitting leadoff they both hit leadoff, I guess, but yeah, they're both having special years. Yeah, he's not, and not playing shortstop at a major league level, having not played shortstop for 8 years, right? Like, and doing well. It's not like, oh, we're just putting him out there because we don't have anyone else. Like, he's playing shortstop over major league shortstops and over major league second baseman. And just the power numbers, the defensive stuff. Obviously, we know what he is in right field, but to kind of be positive WAR defensively, doing what he's doing is pretty wild. And it's hard to make any point for either of them because they both kind of do the same things in a little different way, right? Like they both play really good defense and throw and run and hit and whatever. But it's a special year for this MVP race. It's kind of crazy to me how you look back at all the award stuff, right? And like the difference between what gets it done in that year, right? Like all 3 of those guys, Freddie, Mookie, and Ronald would win MVP like almost every other year, right?
Yeah.
And now one of them is probably going to come in third with like a career year for like borderline Hall of Fame players.
No, it's all a little bit about timing and just having the right season at the right time, that's the unfortunate part of it. And I was thinking about an off-season project of like some of the best seasons that didn't win MVP or didn't win Cy Young. And we've talked about your season where you could have won Cy Young, I think arguably that year, but also a bunch of other years as well. I wanted to ask one more question about this series though, because the Braves look like the most unbeatable team on the face of the earth. And then your Dodgers take 2 out of 3 in what was again, just a hard fought series. Every game was within a couple runs. What did you feel like that was kind of, I know the Dodgers feel like they could beat anybody, but was that kind of a galvanizing win there?
I thought it was a 4 games.
Oh, it was 4 games.
Started on
it was 4 games.
Thursday.
The calendar flipped over. Good catch. So it's a 2-2 split.
Yeah. 8-7 on Thursday.
Totally excuse my question now.
8-7 on Thursday, 6-3 Atlanta on Friday. So they took the front 2, Atlanta 4-2, and then 3-1. Bobby got the win on Sunday.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I think you look at the first game and they kind of rush out to a lead and then it gets really tight late, right? Like you don't know what's going to happen in games like that in the playoffs. And I think being able to stay in games is a big deal. And, obviously a 2-2 split, like you can't take too much out of it, but I think for Bobby and I think for Emmett, I think knowing that they kind of belong there in that kind of series is one of those moments that we're talking about that going forward, that thing might not feel as big as it is. Obviously, I struggled in the playoffs my first couple outings, but I think mentally I didn't have as big a fear of it because I had pitched in that 163 game, right? Like you got close to the atmosphere, but not the exact same. And, being at home in front of their crowd and having that kind of energy obviously is going to be something that's going to help them going forward.
All right. Before we get into Grayson Rodriguez and the video element, I've got like a really hard hitting question here. My college roommates have a fantasy league going. It's a keep one. And I know that you're a big fantasy football guy.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor was my keeper last year.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it again this year. If you keep one, you lose your first round pick. Taylor, Aaron Jones, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith. Do I just punt it and take a first round pick, or do I keep one?
Do you have any idea where your pick would be? Right.
finish second in a 10-teamer, so that means I'll pick ninth. But if you keep it, you forfeit your first round pick. So I could be picking like second.
Well, so you're just analyzing if any of those guys you would take ninth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
How have you fared?
I had the first pick and the third pick in my 2 drafts yesterday.
Jefferson won.
I took Jefferson, and then my other league, which was my small league back home, I logged on a minute too late and got auto picked my 3rd overall pick.
Who was it?
I got Eckler. I'm not mad about it. I just would have liked to have done the pick myself, you know.
Yeah, like
who would
hit
you
the
have
button,
taken?
just maybe still Eckler.
Well, it depends. I didn't even see who went second, so it just auto drafted me Eckler. I guess it would have been Eckler and McCaffrey, but I don't know. It frustrated me. But I did get Justin Jefferson in our Dodger League, which I'm pretty happy with. I had a nice little run in that one.
Okay.
We feel pretty good about our team. I'll tell you. Hold on, let me see here.
Yeah, have we asked? I was gonna say, have we asked on air like who the fantasy football guys are on that Dodgers team?
We've actually kind of morphed our league into like everyone is somehow in. There's a lot of partnerships, a lot of 3-man unit teams. So we end up with like most of the guys are somehow involved, because it's horrific if you're not involved to be in a 25-man locker room and that's all everyone's talking about.
Yeah. You have like a team. You have a co-owner, or are you solo?
I'm with JP Fireheisen.
Nice.
The Rehab boys. But I got Gibbs, Brees Hall, Jefferson, Waddle, Drake London, and I did get Jonathan Taylor in the 5th round. So if he plays football this year, I'll probably be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I took him earlier than that. I took him in the 3rd. Don't feel great about that, but
yeah,
it was before the PUP list. So that's pretty stacked.
We did Kirk Cousins, Jefferson, and Hawkinson. Ooh. So if Minnesota scores, we'll be in business.
Yeah,
I love it.
Who's the kind of the feared person in the locker room in the clubhouse in terms of fantasy football? Like, who's the guy that kind of has the edge a little bit or puts a little bit more time into it?
Kirsch has won a lot. However, Kirsch always has help. I don't think it's always.
Who's the help?
He's played with Stripling before. He's played with some video guys before. I think he's playing with our media guy this year. I don't think he's making a ton of the decisions.
He's kind of a master delegator in that regard.
Yeah. Barnes is pretty big into it. I know he plays in a few leagues, maybe 10. So he's big into it.
Are you still in Jock's league? Because Jock is a commish, right?
I am not in Jock's league. There is a big league that I decided not to play in this year, or decided not to play in ever. But then we started a 12-man dynasty league with some guys. So that one's very interesting. That one was about a 2-week long draft, 8 hours in between picks, that whole thing. So that was my first sleeper draft.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes. This dynasty thing, I'm a little apprehensive on.
Love it. All right. Grayson Rodriguez to wrap. Should we jump back into baseball?
Sure.
Let's do it, because G-Rod had another solid outing last night in LA, but this guy shoved at home against Chicago last week. And Grayson Rodriguez has been kind of a different pitcher since he came back from being optioned. He was struggling. What was it, like a 6.5, 7 Aram before he went down?
Yeah.
It was a 7. He comes back up and he looks like a different beast, man. And I want to walk through a couple of fastballs, a couple of changeups, and I've got, I think, 2 sliders and a curveball as well here. So let's start with the fastballs. This is 3-2 to Lenin Sosa, who's a young guy, rookie, and it's just 100 painted right by him. And then you've got the 91st pitch of the game where he's going 98 up and into Tim Anderson. Like, it's so simple to the naked eye and to the untrained eye, but when you see this cat unleash 198 in these spots, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, first off, he's a big boy, right? So the idea that he's getting out there, I don't know what his extension numbers would say, right? We've talked before about kind of not all 100 is created equal, but when you're 6'4", 6'5", whatever he is, and if he's getting out decent extension wise, like these balls are getting on him. You can see this is away and he's late, which typically the ball away is going to play a little slower, right? They talk about if you throw 95 down the middle, it's like 96 or 97 on this side and it's 93 on this side, right? Just the reaction time.
Yeah.
So to get punch away like that, that ball's got to be going good. And then you see, the opposite effect, right? But no, that's a pretty good throw. I don't know. I can't tell if that's a two-seamer. It's just like kind of that high arm side, but this one seems to have a little more like jump run to it.
Yeah,
But changeups is pitch, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That was going to be my question, was with the fastball, you see kind of glove side. Obviously, when you go glove side, it may not have as much run. The one that goes arm side there and the carry in on TA, do you think those are like intentionally two different pitches, or is that just a release point that can cause the action to be a little bit different for pitchers?
It can be either. I don't know if he throws a two-seamer or not. Obviously, those two pitches look different, but they're in the two locations that they would look the most different, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally.
But for him, that like being able to do that is huge, because I know that the breaking balls are good. They're not, he's been known for the changeup, but being able to get balls up into righties for him is going to be so big if he's going to be trying to play the changeup under to righties.
Yeah, jumping to the changeup now. I've got a 3-2 changeup to Oscar Colas, lefty hitter, and he just dots it on the inside corner. And then we've got another lefty, and he's off the plate away, and he gets a little rollover from Gavin Sheets.
The differentiator, the speed difference on these is really, really good. Obviously, there's some movement to them as well, and seemingly late movement where it buckled that guy. But you just, it's all about spin, right? As long as he sells it and he spins it good, like changeup's just a tough pitch to handle for these guys, especially however that's being perceived, like it's coming at him. You know what I mean? And typically it's hard to get those two reactions from lefties, one on the inside and one on the out, like inner third, outer third, right? So that thing must hold its plane pretty good for him to get a swing over there when it's kind of buckling the other guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When people say late movement and things like that, and you can kind of see that the fade on these pitches, is that just kind of an innate thing that happens, or what can a pitcher do to be able to contribute to that movement being maybe a little bit later and closer to home plate?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Major League Baseball, like any movement you're going to get is going to be later typically because of the seam structure, right? Compared to a college ball. You used to watch college games and these pitches would be huge. That's just because they were moving earlier because of the height of the seams. Mm-hmm. But Major League balls are harder to get to move in general, right? So when you do it right, it's going to move late. And if you don't, it's not going to move as much. So the changeup's kind of a different animal just because it's not super seam dependent in terms of ripping on a seam to spin it. But no, I mean, it's a quality changeup. So obviously throwing 100 with that behind it, he's going to have a chance. And then we've got slider or curveball?
We got slider here, and OKC's in Sugarland this week. You're not going to see this former Skeeter / Space Cowboy Corey Lee, but you've got this slider here where the bottom just kind of falls out here, and then a first pitch slider to Luis Robert that he lays off. But it's a fun 0-0 pitch to one of the better hitters in baseball.
I got the sweepy slider going. This one just stays arm side on him, so he gets the downer to it.
Yeah.
That's another follow-up. So like intent versus just result there. Like, are those two different variations that he's intentionally throwing differently, you think?
I would imagine like he probably, in a nutshell, in a bullpen situation or whatever, wants the second one more than this first one. But that thing's got some teeth. Like this is more like what he has in his head, I bet.
Yeah.
Got it.
But if you think about throwing that pitch and you're going to clip it and it's going to spin like this, if you leave it arm side, you're going to get more to the front and get more of the downer.
Got it. And this is a pitch that this guy has historically chased in Luis Robert too. Like this is, yes, it looks like, I guess, a bad miss, but I feel like it's not really to a guy that consistently goes after sliders low and away, really, until he put together what's He's on pace for what, like an 8-WAR season this year, 7
Yeah,
win
it's
season.
crazy.
Like it's nuts, and a lot of that is because this guy has figured out how to kind of lay off this pitch. But how hard of a pitch is this to lay off of?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think more so than what he chases or whatnot, you've got 2 outs in the top of the first inning. It's an 0-0 slider, right? And I think that kind of shows the respect that he's garnering around the league.
Yeah.
Typically, you're going to try and set him up for the second or third at bat by not showing him that pitch that early. But I guess it's kind of a respect factor for him. But, throwing 100, you'd think like, all right, let's just throw it in. Like, let's see where we're at. But no, if they want to set up the at bats that way, that certainly pitching backwards is something that a lot of us do to try and combat some of these guys that can really hit the heater.
Another first pitch, 2 outs. This is to a lefty, and he really didn't throw many curveballs here. Curveball usage, if I'm not mistaken, has gone down. Cutter usage is pretty much slashed entirely, but curveball usage since he's come back is pretty down. But this was first pitch to Gavin Sheets, lefty. Yeah. I mean, it's 84. It's harder than I think your typical like true curveball. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge curveball, but for him to have something to kind of dump in there, I guess, for lack of a better term, to kind of protect the 3-pitch mix, right? Like I don't think he's going to really intend to use that as like a pitch to get guys out a ton, right? It's just to set up the at bat, get into the at bat. Not super dissimilar from his slider though.
I was going to ask that. So something that people talk about a lot, especially with prospects and players that are pitchers that are developing, is sometimes their breaking ball and their curveball can blend together. For pitchers, what's a way to be able to really differentiate that? Is that really just playing with grips and feels and things like that? Because it seems like a pretty common thing across many
I mean,
pitchers.
if you watch that slider, it looks like kind of that fits his arm slot a little bit more. You look at like the difference in aggressiveness, right? So watch this throw, and it kind of matches the arm. The body's going forward. There's momentum. This is a little more manipulated, if that makes sense. Just
no,
because
you can see it.
His arm slot's a little low.
He's almost less loose. He's
because he's trying to make sure he gets to the front of it, right? Which is the farthest thing you can do is get all the way out there.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, as long as he can make that tight and throw it for a strike where it's not hung, then that's definitely something he's gonna keep in there, keep in the arsenal, But I think his success is gonna come off the fastball changeup probably, and with the occasional slider to get the righties out.
Next time we chat, we'll have what? Yeah.
Oh no, so I had one more question. I was excited about. Sorry. I saw Greg. We had Pitching Ninja on, and that episode's going to come out on Thursday. He just had Greg Maddux on, and they were talking about the 0-2 quote unquote waste pitch and how that's not a real thing. I just wanted to get your perspective on that really quickly, because as Pitching Ninja kind of laid out, Rob was saying in a world of pitch counts, you want to definitely be as efficient as possible. Of course, you don't want to groove one in there 0-2, but what's your mentality 0-2, and what do you think about kind of the idea that a waste pitch doesn't exist? Like that's not really a thing, as Greg Maddux was saying.
I mean, I think as you get higher and higher level of professional baseball or baseball in general, the idea of like striking out looking is kind of less. There's less like impending doom if you strike out looking, right? Like, and literally you strike out looking, as long as you touch it, you got a pretty good chance of getting on base. And so coaches want you to swing and want you to swing and want you to swing. And, in today's game, like you kind of just want to hit the ball hard. And if it's a pitch you can't hit hard, like take it. You see so many of these guys that hit 30, 35, 40 homers that walk a ton and strike out a ton. And that's kind of is what it is. And I guess, to circle back to your question, like the waste pitch was intended to like put a ball in an area where they can't hit it hard, but they're trying to like defend the plate.
Yeah.
And now that striking out looking is kind of not as bad as it used to be, that 0-2 waste pitch has kind of lost its luster, I guess.
It's a great point.
Yeah. All right. Next time we talk, I think you're going to have another rehab under your belt, right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Exciting stuff, man. We're amped, and we're kind of nearing the end of our weekly visits, which is sad, but a lot more to come down the
Yep.
line, and we're fucking amped to see you back on the hill in a Dodger uniform if life and baseball allow this summer. So, dude, appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.